You know, usually when Friday night rolls around and you finally sink into the couch, grab a bowl of popcorn and fire up a movie, there is this expectation of harmless escapism.
Right. Yeah, you just want to tune out.
Exactly. You just want to turn your brain off for 2 hours. You look at the screen and it's simply a portal to a different world. It feels entirely passive,
Yeah.
relaxing.
Yeah, I mean, we like to think of entertainment as existing in this neat little vacuum, completely separate from the real world. Like you're just
Or
the consumer, just taking in a story.
But then you step into the world of international relations, sociology, and media studies, and suddenly that innocent movie screen looks a lot more like a battlefield.
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking at a cinematic landscape that is, honestly, a highly calculated geopolitical weapon.
It really is. It functions as the ultimate cultural Trojan horse.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to completely change the way you watch your next blockbuster. We have a fascinating stack of material today, ranging from dense academic papers to global marketing analyses, covering everything from Hollywood's historical cultural dominance to South Korea's cinematic soft power to how movies literally build what sociologists call imagined communities.
Right, specifically for migrants across the globe.
Yeah. We're going to explore how cinema acts as a tool for cultural imperialism, a builder of global identities, and a surprisingly potent geopolitical force. Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand how cinema is weaponized today, we first have to look at the reigning historical heavyweight that wrote the actual blueprint. I'm talking about Hollywood.
Well, to understand Hollywood's massive global footprint, scholars look at a concept called cultural imperialism.
Hmm.
According to researchers like John Tomlinson, this is essentially a soft form of colonization.
Soft colonization.
Yeah, exactly. It happens when a dominant culture overtakes or even eliminates minority or traditional cultures.
Ah.
But it doesn't happen through military force. It happens through the relentless export of modernity and lifestyle.
Wow.
America's leading export for a very long time has been its culture. I mean, Hollywood films spread American values, things like freedom of expression, consumerism, and a very specific Western lifestyle, simply by making them look incredibly appealing.
It is wild when you look at the specific details of how movies have shaped daily life across the globe. Like, you watch a movie and think, oh, that's just a cool outfit.
Right.
But then a film like Flashdance comes out in the 1980s, and suddenly millions of people all over the world are wearing leg warmers and off-the-shoulder sweatshirts.
It's totally viral.
It is. Or you
Yeah.
go back to 1955 with Rebel Without a Cause, and James Dean literally defines the global archetype of what a teenager is supposed to act and look like before the concept even fully existed globally.
That's a great example. And even language gets colonized. Catchphrases from Casablanca or Star Wars permanently alter how people speak on a daily basis.
May the force be with you, right?
Exactly. But it goes far beyond fashion and catchphrases, though. The political applications of Hollywood are profound. During World War II, the American government actively recognized cinema's potential to shape global narratives.
They were funding films, weren't they?
They were. They utilized films like Frank Capra's Why We Fight series to instill a specific brand of patriotism. And Casablanca, which you just mentioned, functioned as a cinematic discourse framing America as a benevolent, neutral haven during the early days of the war.
I always think of the Cold War era, too. You had all those sci-fi films like The Day the Earth Stood Still or Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But how exactly did a movie about aliens instill political ideology?
Well, those sci-fi films functioned as safe containers for unspeakable public anxieties. By utilizing the mechanism of science fiction, filmmakers could visualize abstract geopolitical threats.
Okay, so making the invisible visible.
Exactly. When Invasion of the Body Snatchers showed neighbors being replaced by emotionless pod people, it wasn't just a monster story. It provided a direct visual mechanism for the Red Scare.
Oh, wow. The idea that anyone could be a secret communist.
Yes. The terrifying idea that anyone around you could secretly be a communist sympathizer stripped of American individualism. Or take the alien Klaatu in The Day the Earth Stood Still. He arrives with overwhelming, unstoppable force. He serves as a stand-in for the threat of nuclear annihilation.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, these narratives actively shape public paranoia by giving form to the invisible threats of the era.
I have to push back on this a little bit, though. Is the film industry actually creating this culture, or is it just reflecting what's already happening in society?
That's the big debate.
Right, because the imperialism label feels so intentional, but maybe Hollywood is just really good at giving people what they already want. I like to think of it like a funhouse mirror. It reflects society, sure, but it warps and shapes your face to match the reflection. The audience sees the warped version, assumes that's reality, and starts acting like it.
Scholars analyzing this dynamic actually validate that exact cycle. What begins as a reflection quickly transforms into creation. And because Hollywood's funhouse mirror is so massive, it has caused a global ripple effect referred to as Hollywoodization.
Hollywoodization, okay.
Yeah, other national film industries are physically changing their DNA to compete. Bollywood, for example, historically focused heavily on traditional family plots, epic runtimes, and elaborate musical numbers.
Right, very distinct style.
But now analysts track a distinct shift in Bollywood toward Western-style romance, shorter runtimes, and the inclusion of sex scenes. They're adopting a Western cinematic grammar to remain competitive globally.
Which has caused some serious cultural friction in India based on the research.
Definitely. The Korean and Thai film industries are also prime examples. There's a Thai film mentioned in our material called Beautiful Boxer.
Oh, I saw that in the notes.
Yeah, it tells a very culturally specific Thai story, but specifically adopted Hollywood's fast-paced action thriller editing and digital effects. The Hollywood blueprint proved that if you export your culture effectively, you gain global dominance. Once that blueprint proved successful, other nations started taking rigorous notes.
Wait, what happens when someone else masters the funhouse mirror? Because that brings us to the most successful recent challenger to the Hollywood throne. South Korea didn't just take notes, they basically rewrote the textbook.
They really did. And to understand South Korea's strategy, political scientist Joseph Nye's concepts of power are incredibly useful. Nye breaks power down into three categories.
Okay.
First is hard power, which is pure coercion. Think military force or economic sanctions. North Korea is the ultimate example here, trying to gain influence through fear and nuclear capabilities.
Right, do what we want, or else.
Exactly. Then there is smart power, a combination of military might and cultural influence, which perfectly describes the United States.
Makes sense.
Finally, there is soft power. This is the ability to influence others through attraction and persuasion. You get people to want what you want because they admire your culture, your art, and your values.
Yeah.
South Korea, operating without the massive military might of its neighbors, leaned entirely into soft power.
This is the Korean wave, or Hallyu. A lot of people think this just started a few years ago with K-pop bands blowing up on social media.
Oh, it goes way further back.
Yeah, the history shows this actually goes back to the 1990s with K-dramas. And it wasn't just a happy accident. Specific structural changes made this possible. The real turning point was surviving censorship. Up until 1996, the South Korean government strictly censored filmmakers.
Yes, very strictly.
But in 1996, the Constitutional Court ruled that censorship was unconstitutional. The creative floodgates finally opened.
And that new creative freedom collided with a massive economic shift. In 1997, the Asian financial crisis hit. While devastating to the traditional economy, it led major domestic conglomerates in South Korea, the cables, to step in and invest heavily in the film and cultural industries.
So the big corporations took over.
Exactly. They essentially brought venture capitalist logic to cinema. They funded fresh talent, professionalized the production structure, and optimized for export. By 2009, the South Korean government recognized the asset they had built.
They leaned into it.
Big time. They created a presidential council, specifically for national branding, treating culture as a fundamental pillar of their diplomacy alongside national defense and trade.
So what does this all mean? The incredible, almost unbelievable irony here is that the 1997 Asian economic crisis, which devastated markets, actually fueled South Korea's global rise.
It's wild.
Because of the crisis, the South Korean currency plummeted, making K-dramas significantly cheaper for foreign television networks in places like China and Japan to purchase compared to Japanese shows.
Right, they were just looking for a bargain.
Exactly. Foreign networks bought up Korean content simply to save money on their programming budgets. In doing so, they accidentally sparked the global Korean fever. The economics forced the exposure, and the sheer quality of the content hooked the audience.
Capitalizing on a crisis is a hallmark of their strategy. But to truly understand how South Korean soft power functions today, we have to look under the hood of their biggest global hits.
Oh, let's do it.
Because the sheer irony of the content itself is staggering. The very films and shows exporting South Korean soft power and generating billions of dollars in global revenue are, at their core, brutal, unflinching critiques of the capitalist system that fuels that exact same power.
Let's look at Parasite, which made history as the first non-English language film to win Best Picture at the Oscars.
What's fascinating here is Parasite was heavily backed by the private sector, specifically by Mikey Lee, a massive figure in South Korean entertainment and a Samsung heiress.
Wait, really? A billionaire funded an anti-capitalist movie.
Yes, you have the ultimate capitalist entity backing a film that tears capitalism apart. Director Bong Joon-ho's symbology is incredibly deliberate. Look at the use of Wi-Fi in the opening scenes.
Oh, right. They're searching for a signal.
Exactly. The poor Kim family doesn't have their own connection. They desperately search for an unsecured signal from a nearby cafe, crouching near their toilet to get it. This visualizes the dependence of the lower class on the infrastructure of the wealthy, highlighting the irony of South Korea being one of the most technologically connected countries in the world, yet leaving its poorest citizens marginalized.
The physical architecture of the movie does the exact same thing. The wealthy Park family lives in this stunning, sprawling mansion on a hill, while the Kims live in a cramped semi-basement. The director uses stairs constantly to reinforce this rigid vertical social ladder.
And the weather itself is weaponized as a class symbol. During a torrential rainstorm, the wealthy parts view the rain as a minor inconvenience. It simply ruins a luxury camping trip. But because water physically flows downhill, that exact same rain causes a devastating, life-threatening flood for the Kim family, completely destroying their semi-basement home. It vividly demonstrates how a single environmental event affects different classes in entirely different ways.
That scene was so intense.
And the film even tackles Western obsession. The wealthy family's child is obsessed with Native American costumes, which analysts highlight as a critique of upper-class ignorance, reducing a complex, tragic history to a mere plaything or status symbol. And of course, there is the hidden basement beneath the wealthy house.
The man living down there in secret for years.
Yeah. Cultural analysts point out that this subterranean existence acts as a metaphor for North Korea. It represents a neighbor living entirely outside the margins of the thriving, visible society above, embodying extreme marginalization and the lingering trauma of a divided peninsula.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If Parasite was the critical darling, Squid Game was the absolute global sledgehammer. I remember watching Squid Game, and the visual choices were just wild, like that giant glowing piggy bank physically suspended over the players' heads, or the players voting on whether to stay, and the guards in those pink suits with the simple geometric shapes on their masks.
Those visuals are entirely deliberate mechanisms for critique. The piggy bank is the ultimate literalization of hypercapitalism, the literal symbol of greed hovering over everything the characters do, containing the cash they are voluntarily risking their lives for.
What about the voting?
Regarding the vote, the players are given a democratic choice on whether to leave the deadly game. They actually vote to leave. But once they return to the real world, they realize that crushing debt makes reality just as hopeless, so they come back.
Oh.
It illustrates that democratic voting is an illusion of choice when the actual economic power stays entirely with the elites running the system. The guards, with their featureless masks and strict hierarchies, act exactly like faceless corporate cubicle workers, mindlessly following orders in a deeply unethical system.
Even the games themselves operate as metaphors. The tug-of-war isn't just a playground game, it's a zero-sum mechanism. The only way your team survives is by actively dragging the other team off a cliff to their deaths. It is the darkest possible interpretation of competitive, free-market capitalism.
So you binge-watched this on your couch last year, completely absorbed in the suspense. But did your viewership actually change anything? Winning Oscars and breaking Netflix streaming records is fantastic for a nation's economy. But does soft power actually move the geopolitical needle?
That's the million-dollar question. It's one thing to make $1 billion, it's another to actually change how countries deal with each other.
Tangible political shifts do occur. Looking inward first, the global attention and critical acclaim of Parasite embarrassed the South Korean government into action.
Embarrass them?
Yes. Following the film's success, the government officially announced funding and renovations for 1,500 real-world semi-basement apartments in Seoul to improve living conditions. A piece of cinema directly resulted in infrastructure funding for the poor.
That is tangible impact. What about regionally, with their neighbors?
Regionally, cultural diplomacy frequently bypasses decades of political gridlock. Japan and South Korea share a very fraught historical relationship. But because K-dramas became so wildly popular with the Japanese public, it paved the way for Japan to lift its long-standing ban on Korean cultural products with the open door policy in 1998.
Oh, wow.
More recently, look at China. In 2016, China instituted a massive ban on all South Korean entertainment as direct retaliation against South Korea, deploying the TAD U.S. missile defense system.
Okay, so a classic hard power dispute.
Exactly. But the internal demand for Korean content in China remains so relentless that in 2022, China finally lifted that 6-year entertainment ban. Soft power essentially forced the geopolitical door back open.
The most intense example in the material has to be North Korea. We're talking about the most closed-off nation on Earth. Yet, smugglers are bringing K-dramas and K-pop into North Korea on USB flash drives.
It's incredibly risky.
The impact is staggering. Defectors who have escaped North Korea admit that seeing these South Korean shows was the catalyst for them leaving. They watched a simple romantic comedy and realized the outside world isn't a starving, war-torn wasteland like their government claims. They saw people driving cars, eating at restaurants, and speaking freely.
The visual evidence of stability and wealth simply shattered the totalitarian propaganda. The North Korean regime recognizes this as a massive existential threat. Kim Jong-un has explicitly called for a stop to this cultural infiltration.
It's that serious.
Absolutely. Distributing or consuming South Korean media in North Korea is now subject to severe punishments, imprisonment, or even public executions.
Can a TV show literally dismantle a dictatorship? We are watching the ultimate real-time battle between soft power South Korea exporting culture and hard power North Korea executing citizens for watching a drama. It's mind-blowing.
It proves that narratives are inherently dangerous to regimes that rely on controlling the truth. But everything we've talked about so far is top-down massive governments, cables, and billionaires weaponizing film. What about the people who don't have a country? How does a stateless person or a displaced migrant use this exact same medium?
Our sources shift focus to look at individuals navigating life between borders.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, political scientist Benedict Anderson introduced a concept called imagined communities. Anderson originally used this to describe nations, arguing that a nation is imagined because you will never actually meet everyone in your country, yet you feel a deep, inherent connection to them.
Because of shared experiences.
Right. You share narratives, symbols, and rituals. You read the same news, you celebrate the same holidays. Sociologists now take Anderson's concept and apply it to global migrant populations.
People who have left their homeland, who are scattered across the globe, need a way to maintain a community when they don't share physical geography anymore. They use cinema. Films like The Farewell, Minari, Lion, and In the Heights aren't just tucking stories, they act as vital cultural texts.
They utilize the mechanism of shared cultural memory. Take Minari, for example. The specific scenes showing the grandmother preparing water drop wort, or the detailed dynamics of traditional Korean family roles struggling to adapt to rural America aren't just plot points. They are rituals.
Right.
When a migrant viewer sees that specific food preparation projected on a massive screen, it grounds them. It provides a shared visual language of resilience.
What about The Farewell?
In The Farewell, the entire plot revolves around a family keeping a terminal diagnosis a secret from their grandmother. It perfectly visualizes the agonizing dissonance of navigating Eastern concepts of collective family burden while living in a Western world that values individual truth.
Cinema isn't just geopolitical propaganda orchestrated by governments. It is also a bottom-up survival mechanism. It allows people who have left their homelands to anchor their identities to a screen. Seeing that specific emotional tension validated in a theater provides a surrogate homeland for hybrid identities. It proves that movies can build communities out of thin air, providing a home for those who feel displaced.
It tells the migrant viewer that their complex experience is real, it is seen, and they are part of a broader, imagined community that understands them completely.
So bringing this all back to you, the listener, the next time Friday night rolls around, the next time you sink into your couch, grab that popcorn and hit play on a foreign film, an indie darling, or a massive Hollywood blockbuster, remember that you aren't just relaxing.
They're really not.
You are stepping onto that battlefield. You're actively participating in a global tug-of-war for your values, your consumer habits, and your fundamental worldview. The funhouse mirror is reflecting back at you, but it is deeply shaping who you are.
This raises an important question, especially as we look to the very near future. If traditional movies crafted by humans with real cultural histories have the power to undermine dictatorships, change corporate structures, and forge global identities, what happens to global culture when AI starts instantly generating these narratives?
Oh, man.
Right. When a machine can perfectly mimic the cultural symbols and emotional hooks of a society, who will control the imagined community then?